holidays, the focus invariably turns to spending rather than saving. While it's okay to indulge a bit during the festive season, it's equally important to ensure that you commit to regain your financial shape for the year ahead. So joining us in our Durban studio, we have Sohini Munsamy, who is the head of EB Consulting at, I think it's 10 times investments or 10x investment. She's going to have to explain that one to me. She's going to talk to us more about financial planning, not just for the festive season, but the year ahead. Wonderful to have you on the program. Thanks for joining us, Sohini.
Good morning, Leanne. Thanks very much for having me. And it's 10x investments.
Thank you. I was hoping I got one of them right. All right. So Sohini, we're at that time of the year when people, we hopefully, I'm not saying everybody, because everyone's going to shout at me when I say everybody receives their bonuses, because not everyone gets one, but a lot of people do. And retailers bring out all those festive season sales. People tend to overspend at this time. How can one avoid being in that inevitable financial hangover at the beginning of Jan?
It's absolutely right. As you say, as 2015 sort of comes to a close and people start to focus on annual holidays, spending becomes the theme rather than saving. And it's absolutely right to say that one can't always guarantee that a bonus or a 13 check will be paid. But yes, as it's important not to budget for it, most employers do actually pay a 13 check or a bonus to individuals. And there's a few ways in which that money can be spent. Of course, most of it will be needed to offset the seasonal expenses, but it's quite important to also reserve some of that income for the invariably higher January credit card bill, which people tend to have as a result of having a longer gap between their December and their January salaries. And also things like school fees, the payment of school fees at the beginning of the year. It's important to take that into account. And also another good idea in terms of the year-end bonuses is also to consider saving some of that money toward your company retirement fund. And that's if your employer hasn't already done that on your behalf. I think you mentioned as well, Leanne, about the sales, and then the temptation is ever present. I think we always sort of inundated with the marketing and the online shopping, promoting the accessibility and the ease and the convenience of having access to those products. And I think it's human nature, isn't it, that we don't want to get we don't want to miss out on a sale and getting a bargain. But it's quite important to try and avoid that temptation, especially when you're committed to sort of a structured budget. And discipline, I think, is the key.
Yeah, it is. Sometimes it is easier said than done, though. You can imagine, because people are so tempted to just be a little bit reckless. But when we look at this year ahead, and not that you're an economist and going to predict the year ahead, but I think it's common knowledge that we're looking at a very difficult path ahead of us here in South Africa, and not to mention the rest of the world. But we can see how we are ending off the year. We can only imagine going into the next year, it's going to be just as tough. So pulling in those purse strings now, I suppose, has new meaning. It's probably one of the most crucial times to do that with this little bit of extra cash that you do have.
Absolutely. I think you're quite right in saying that it is unsettling times for South Africans in terms of the economic factors. And I think the big theme at the moment has been the weakening rand. And really, in terms of advice around that, I think the key there is to the individual to try and reduce in as far as possible your personal debt levels. And the reason that I say that is that with the weakening currency, what tends to happen is that it does have a negative impact on inflation. And what we expect from that is that interest rates may tend to increase faster than we expect, and that tends to have the most impact on those who are indebted. So those who do have sort of the credit card debt and the debt in that regard will be affected most by the increase of interest rates. So I think we do understand, and those of us who watch the news do understand that we are going into trying times, and it's important to come up with a plan and understand what the income that we have at our disposal, and to then make sure that we don't exceed and live beyond our means. That's essentially what it is.
That's one of the big things, because no matter what way you look at it, and everywhere we are looking right now, we're seeing talk of interest rate hikes that are going to be happening, something that is almost inevitable when, as you mentioned, we see our currency at these levels. So when interest rates go up, our debt goes higher, and at the end of the day, we look at news that South Africans are in debt, and I'm sure that this weak performance against the US dollar will negatively impact us. So how can people achieve the discipline when it comes to finances? How can we become more financially savvy and less reckless, living for the future as opposed to in the moment when it comes to savings?
Absolutely. I think it really is very difficult, and it differs per individual. But really, in terms of trying to reduce the personal debt levels, I think, like we said, discipline is key. If you're feeling as an individual that your belt is tightened, the answer is not to loosen that belt and take it down a notch by, for example, increasing your credit card limit. But rather, my advice would certainly be to start sort of reducing the lifestyle and the costs and the expenses, and try to manage that until you get to a point where you feel a bit more comfortable. I think the idea, especially with a well-constructed plan for the year ahead, is to smooth your spending over the year, and to understand the income that's at your disposal, to understand that there will be expenses that will pop up unexpectedly, that you wouldn't necessarily have budgeted for, and to ensure that you don't need to dip into your long-term savings in order to fund those expenses. If you're expecting a fairly big cash outlay at some point in the year, you could potentially manage your spending around those months and try to cut back a bit and reduce in order to provide for the larger expenses that you might incur.
No doubt. Just don't go and buy that expensive car and house just yet, and those magnificent diamond earrings perhaps you've been looking at. Just on a final closing note, one thing that's really important as well is the youth moving into the workforce. And once you start earning a salary, it's a wonderful feeling to think, I can buy anything and I can just sort of take my check and spend it. What advice do you give to youngsters? And I mean, I've asked this question a million times. When is the best time to start saving? And as soon as you can, I know is the answer, but let's get it from you as well.
Yeah, I think the youth are in a very fortunate position, which they don't often realize. And I think, from the perspective of being able to invest and be able to really generate wealth through an investment, I believe that what you truly need to do is invest in the market, pay low fees, and give it time, give your investment time. And the young people of today have the benefit of time and should absolutely use that to their advantage. I think it is very tricky because it's not present, it's not top of mind in terms of thinking of the future and the future investments that will be necessary. But really, I think that's just the message, is that you have the advantage of time. Make the most use of it. I mean, it was Einstein who said that compound interest is the greatest force on earth, and those who understand it will earn it, and those who don't will inevitably end up paying it. So really, you want to be on the right side of that equation, and also, quite importantly, be good to your future self. Think of your future self and make plans for one day, and stick to your goals, stick to your financial plan, stick to your budget, and also keep an eye on your finances. It's very important.
Thank you so much for talking to us here on the program, just giving us a little bit of insight into financial planning for the year ahead. Sohini Munsamy is in our Durban studio, the head of EB Consulting. Thank you so much for your time here on the program. Let's get to another weather update. It is Friday after all. We are going